Recently, Matt from the Linux Cast put out this video. Linux distro reviews are mostly terrible. And as someone who does Linux videos and tries to actively avoid making this content because I just find it personally pretty boring to make, I have to pretty much agree. Now, it's not like my content is that much better in some cases, but I agree with this point. Now, while I say that I agree, I only mostly agree because I feel like some of the points he makes in this video go a little bit too harsh to discredit the usefulness of these videos. So I thought, let's do a reaction video, a reply video, whatever you want to call it. Now, I will be jumping around a little bit because Matt tends to repeat himself a little bit more than even I do. So let's get started.
Distro reviews are some of the most popular videos on my channel, and that's true for a lot of Linux YouTubers, no matter their size. A lot of Linux YouTubers thrive on making Linux distro reviews, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I don't think that's always a guarantee for good views. There are certainly a lot of big channels that do really well doing these videos, but you'll find just as many tiny channels that do nothing but pump out distro reviews and no one really cares about them. But for these people where it does work, you're doing these big releases or these weird releases, I think that's generally true.
Nothing wrong with that, but the problem is that the way we as a Linux YouTube community have decided to do Linux distro reviews is not good.
Yes, very true.
Like I said, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone because I've done this as well. Many of the first looks on my channel follow a specific format that the vast majority of Linux YouTubers also follow. You know, we install the distro, usually or almost exclusively in a virtual machine.
And the virtual machine is a point I wish that Matt focused a little bit more on in this video, because the virtual machine is a great way to get a basic understanding of a system. There's nothing inherently wrong with using a virtual machine. They're easy to capture, they're easy to install on, they're easy to reinstall. There's no risk of ruining your main system. But the way they normally get used is not suitable for reviewing a distro. Most people aren't doing like a Mudahar style VM where they're doing GPU pass-through and making it seem like an actual hardware system. What they're doing is relying on VirtualBox, QEMU, things like this, and the GPU drivers built into them. So not only is it going to be slower than rendering directly on hardware, leading in some cases to animation-heavy distros or animation-heavy desktops looking choppier than they really should be, some software just doesn't play nicely with these drivers, and it doesn't give an accurate representation of the quality of the distro. Anyway, back to the video.
And then, once the distro has installed, we'll...
Actually, on that installation point, a lot of these distro reviews also focus a lot on the installation process. And if it's using something like the Ubuntu installer, the Manjaro installer, things that are like common installers, it's going to be exactly the same regardless of which distro you're using. It deserves at best maybe a footnote, not a 5 or a 10-minute segment. Anyway, back to this.
Virtual machine, get into the distro. We'll walk you through what the distro looks like, and then we'll walk you through the applications that are installed by default, and then we give an opinion on it. It's not good. Now,
True.
The reason why it's not good is because you can't tell anything, or at least very few things, about a distro by A, installing it in a virtual machine, but
As we
also
mentioned,
by spending like 20 minutes with it. Like, you can't,
I disagree on that point. This is the first big thing that I wanted to make this video on. I don't think that these inherently serve no purpose because you've looked at it for like 20 or 30 minutes. But I don't think when you're doing it like that, it's a review. What it is a first impression. And if you're going over like, hey, this is installed, it's using this desktop, it's got these set of applications, it's got this theme, all of that stuff, that's not a review. But I still think that knowing what's there is actually really useful, because I could go and install like 20 different distros, for example, just to find out the exact same thing. Or I could watch 20 10-minute videos and get that information. And I think for that one purpose, having these videos is super useful. And generally when I do my software videos, I basically do the exact same thing, but I specifically don't refer to them as reviews. What they are is a first impression, a showcase, things like that. I think that is a much better term for them.
And if you have made up your mind, well, I mean, you probably have some more preconceived notions over the distro than you probably expect.
Ubuntu and Fedora are definitely good contenders for this for certain people.
So this whole idea that you can review a distribution in a virtual machine in the course of 20 or 30 minutes is just, it's farcical. It's
Absolutely.
not a good thing, and it's not a good way of going about doing things. And like I said, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody because I've done this exact same thing.
There's certainly a couple of people I could mention right now, but I think you guys can probably guess if you've done at all any digging in the Linux space.
It is a very easy proposition to sit down in front of your computer, go to DistroWatch, find a distro that no one's ever heard of before, create a series called WTF, and then make a video in a half an hour or so.
I would hope that if you're doing any of these distro videos, you're not actually taking half an hour to do it. I hope that what you're doing is sitting down beforehand, doing a bit of pre-planning, just to make sure you have at least, some level of understanding of what's going on. Because I used to make videos like this way back in the past. I would learn the software as I was recording, and those made for really bad videos. But, some people happen to like them, and some people do like that complete raw, off-the-cuff way of recording. It's just not really my thing.
Going through that outline that I just said, it's very easy to do that. These are very easy videos to make.
Yep.
And usually very easy videos to edit.
Yep. Well, especially if you're just doing, 30 minutes uncut, for example.
They do very well on YouTube. They get a lot of views. Some of my videos that are distro reviews that follow that format have gotten tens of thousands of views. And like I said, people...
I think that's mainly going to be true for the really big distro releases, like, hey, it's Ubuntu 22.10. Hey, it's Ubuntu 23.04. It's Fedora, what's the latest version? 37? Is 38 out next year or something? I don't know. Whatever the big release is, but it's much the same as the general tech space. If you get this video out as quickly as possible, even if it's not the best video it could be, it's going to have that giant traffic boost because basically you're getting greenfield content on a really popular topic, which doesn't really happen that often.
They click on these things like crazy and they seem to just watch them. But as a YouTuber, as someone who's trying to elevate the content on YouTube just a little...
Yeah, I say this to myself as well, but, then I pump out whatever I pump out.
I have tried over the last 4 or 5 months or so to ease myself away from distro reviews in that manner.
And I can absolutely respect Matt for trying out something new when he was doing something that worked. For a lot of people, they want to just keep milking whatever is gonna be good until it is dry. And there's nothing wrong with that either, but it's certainly exciting to try out something new.
I try to do only long-term reviews, or at least reviews that take longer than 20 minutes.
Honestly, the more I hear the word review in this context, the less it actually makes any sense to me. When I hear the word review, it means you have a deep understanding of whatever it is you're talking about. There's no such thing as a short-term review. That's just a showcase, a first impression, things like that. A great example of this is with Asmongold's New World review. He reviewed the game after playing it for 500 hours. He knew about endgame, he knew about the leveling progression, he knew it was good, there weren't that many good things, he knew it was bad, there was definitely a lot of those things, and he knew everything that there was to know. This is a review. But if you're doing something like reviewing a game when you got to level 10 of 60, you don't know what the full game's about. You can say what your initial impressions are, you can say what that early game experience is like, but you can't review the game. And the same is true for distro. You can say, oh, I know the apps that are installed, I know, the installation process and the general experience, but you don't have a deep understanding of the bugs or the issues with certain configurations or maybe the software that's available and things like that.
So, for example, my last one was the Ubuntu review. I used that for 2 weeks. Now, that's not long-term or anything, but I installed it on hardware, multiple.
I would say in the context of Ubuntu, 2 weeks is probably fine, especially if you're daily driving it. Ubuntu is a very iterative distro. Each new version is going to be basically the old version with a couple of tweaks. If it's some completely new concept like you're using Nix, for example, I think that should be a lot longer so you have a good... Bedrock. It should be a lot longer so you have a really deep understanding of how things all piece together, how it's different from the other distros, and why you might actually want to use it.
Multiple times, I used it for 2 weeks, and then I gave a review of it. And I think that this is a better way of doing things. It's
Absolutely.
Just something, it allows you to actually have a sense of how good or bad a distro is. If you've actually used it on hardware, or even better, a variety of hardware, and you can give the people who are...
A lot of people don't have extra systems to try out, but ultimately that would be the better way to do it. If you have, like, NVIDIA cards, for example, and it ships Wayland by default, you might want to know, is it actually set up properly to handle Wayland on NVIDIA? In many cases, it might be, but in many cases, it might not be.
Or watching that video, a sense of how good that distro is, or how bad it is, or what problems there are. Chances are, if you've just used a distro in a VM for 20 or 30 minutes, you haven't experienced the problems that you would experience if you've used it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or whatever. So for me personally, I've decided that there are going to be no distro reviews on this channel that follow that format any longer. It's just not really anything that I'm interested in for multiple reasons. I don't think that they're good, which is the biggest reason, but also
established,
I'm just bored of them. I'm bored of watching them. I'm bored of recording them.
They're not really content made for the experienced Linux users, so I can kind of understand why you wouldn't really want to watch them. The last time I was actively watching a lot of these videos was back when I first started using Linux. Once you have a distro set up and you know what you're going to be using, you know what you like, and in many cases, you're not going to swap anyway, so why would you look at stuff going on for another distro? If you're using Ubuntu and a new version comes out, you are going to install it anyway. It doesn't really matter what's going on with those videos.
They're just not fun for me to make anymore. They're easy. Like I said, it's really easy to sit down and do these things because they all follow the same format or whatever. And it's just popping them out. You could pop out 3 or 4 a week if you wanted to.
Or if you're certain channels, 1 or 2 a day.
And have yourself a really good YouTube channel that probably gets lots of views and lots of subscribers. But for me,
as I mentioned earlier, it really depends on the individual channel. A lot of them do well, but if you just have a boring personality, no one's going to watch it in the first place. Just be somewhat exciting, preferably have, maybe not the mic I have, but a mic that people can tolerate listening to, and yeah, they'll generally do pretty well then.
Me personally, I like making videos that I enjoy, that take a little bit of effort.
Fair enough.
I joke all the time that I'm a lazy person, and I think I am a lazy person, but...
I know the feeling.
I would much rather put some effort into making a true review than pop out these, very simple... VM-based distro first looks.
At least, please don't do them in a VM. At least just install them on another SSD. SSDs are very cheap. They're like $40. And if you're doing well on YouTube, I hope you can afford an SSD. Or just, find something somewhere. Do it on an external hard drive if you have to. Just don't do it in a VM.
That I've posted many times in the past. So overall, I would just kind of like to address the Linux YouTube community. I understand where you're coming from when making these videos. As I've said, they're very popular, and there's a reason why when Ubuntu does a new release, every single Linux YouTuber out there releases a review that exact day. And, I'm not going to say that those guys haven't used Ubuntu or whatever it is for, a few days or something like that, because
in the case of a Linux distro like Ubuntu, there is going to be the pre-release versions as well. Now, I don't know how many people are actually using these in the context of their reviews, but that is going to give you a lot more time than, like, reviewing a GPU, for example. So NVIDIA is going to send it to you, like, maybe a week or 2 before, but the early versions of a distro, they might be out, like, a month earlier, so you can get generally a good idea of what the full release is going to be. And then when the full release comes out, then you can, finalize everything and make sure things haven't suddenly changed.
you can tell all these things, and it lowers the quality of the content that you're making, at least in my opinion. It just does, and it shows a lack of effort. And like I said, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I do lack of effort videos all the time. Like half of my videos, at least.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with him on this one.
Are lack of effort videos. And like I said, also, I've done these videos in the past, so I understand. But I just implore people to start thinking about the content that they're creating and maybe put a little bit more effort into it if you can, simply because it does make a difference. It will...
I think it definitely does make a difference when you are properly thinking about what's going on, properly breaking down the distro, and giving a actual review.
Is the whole point of it. You want to give the audience the best overview of what that distro is about and make that video worth their time. Because at the end of the day, time's all we got. And I don't really have any data to back this up, but I would reckon that quite a few people who click on a video that says Ubuntu 22.10 review, and it's just them installing Ubuntu and showing you what apps have been installed, pre-installed, and then saying, "Oh, this is really good." I would bet that a lot of people are pretty disappointed that they clicked on that video if they even made it past like the 3-minute mark. So,
well, Matt, you actually do have data on this. You have a YouTube channel where you've made some of these videos yourself. I really would have liked Matt to show his own statistics here to demonstrate whether that's actually the case. Now, that's just a single set of data. It might just be that a lot of people don't like the way that Matt was approaching these, but it's at least something.
And that's my plan going forward. So if you have thoughts on this, I know this was a little bit of inside baseball, but it does impact the audience quite a bit on the Linux YouTube community. So if you have thoughts on this, you leave those in comments in the comment section below. I'd love to.
Or how about I just make my own video and, use you for content? That's also an option. But yeah, unlike the last time we did one of these reaction, reply videos, whatever you want to call it, I didn't disagree with a lot of the points that Matt was bringing up, but I do feel like he was a little bit too harsh on this style of content. I do think it does definitely serve a purpose, but it's not a review. It's simply not a review. It's a showcase, and that's fine. If you want to make showcase content, go ahead. I make showcase content myself, but I don't pretend like we're doing a full review here and I have a deep understanding of what's actually going on. So go show Matt some love. He makes great videos and deserves a lot more attention than he gets. Also, go and check out the times he's appeared on my Tech of a Tea podcast. I think we've done, maybe 2 or 3 episodes together. I thought they were really fun and, go check them out. So let me know your thoughts on this whole situation in the comment section down below. Do you care at all about this distro showcase content, this distro review content, or do you just ignore the fact that it exists? Also, if you happen to know some of the channels that I was making slight references to, I know someone's going to comment about them down below anyway, so I'm just going to encourage you to do so. Do so for the algorithm, and that would be great. So if you like this video, I'm not going to make more of these style of videos. If something comes up, I'll make one then. But if you like this video, go and like the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, go check out my Patreon, subscribe to Libera Pay, linked down below. I've got a podcast called Tech Over Tea and a gaming channel called Brodie Robertson Plays. That's going to be it for me, and I'm out.